Clemson wide receiver Justyn Ross is one of the biggest wild cards in this year's draft. Where will he land and what is his current dynasty value? All that and so much more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Welcome into the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, everybody. I am Kate Magdziuk. You could follow me on Twitter at FFBallBlast. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow him on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Be sure to give the show a follow at Locked On Dynasty. Hit that subscribe button anywhere you listen to your fantasy football podcast. Check out the YouTube channel. We've got so many exciting things coming up for you, especially as we head into hashtag draft season. We're going to continue our profiles today. We've been breaking down lots of wide receivers over the last week, Marcus. And today we get to talk about wide receiver Justyn Ross out of Clemson.
Yeah, one of the draft's biggest wild cards. And frankly, somebody who draft Twitter can't agree on at all. Kate, as you know, I do this consensus board where I take all the top draft analysts and I put them in an Excel sheet and we see how they rank everybody. We have one major draft site that has Justyn Ross as the 33rd overall player in the class. And then we have another one, we'll just say Lance Zierlein from NFL.com, has him at 239 right now. Ooh. It's the widest gap of any player in this year's draft. So he is quite the prospect that we're going to dig into today. But I want to start with you. What did you see when you watched Justyn Ross on tape?
I mean, so let's distinguish here when we're watching. When we're watching, Justyn Ross is such a big, it's a big piece of how you're going to evaluate him. Obviously, Justyn Ross out of Clemson played with Mr. Trevor Lawrence. Mm-hmm. And that was a very good era for him in his freshman season. Just absolutely dominated 1,000 receiving yards right out of the gate, was a huge contributor. And every single year since has either had declining performance, health issues. It feels like it's always been something. Even dating back in 2021, wasn't working with an accurate quarterback, and it showed in his stats as well. Wasn't a wide receiver that necessarily elevated the quarterback he was playing with. He needed a guy like Trevor Lawrence to help him get productive. He's a big dude. He's 6'4", but he's got a relatively smaller frame for that build. I think he could stand to put on some muscle at the NFL level. Just because he is a little bit more on that thin side of the frame, but just again, like you said, a total wild card. Ceiling could be super high, had a very early breakout age, but we didn't see that progression throughout his collegiate career. And I'm curious as to your thoughts. Is this because, was the freshman season a fluke, or did injuries and circumstance hold him back? And I think that's the biggest question. And that's the reason for this huge gap, is that, if it is circumstance, you're getting a good, solid, big wide receiver who I think still has plenty of development to go, but he's got a nice frame. I think if he improves on his strength, he could be a really solid wide receiver at the next level, but we don't know. So what are your thoughts as far as what is it that held Justyn Ross back?
Yeah, so let's start with 2018. I don't think that was a fluke season, because the way that he played in the two playoff games was incredible against Notre Dame and Alabama. 6 for 148, 2 touchdowns, 6 for 153 to touchdown. I mean, you can make a case in the playoff games he was the best player on the field. Like, he was incredible. And then in 2019, still really good. Not quite as good. I think you saw him get a little bit more attention. T. Higgins was actually the more productive receiver there, but really good. Kate, I really think this is just a case where the injuries have zapped him of a lot of his athleticism, because 2020, he had a bulging disc in his back, and he felt some tingling down his legs and down his extremities. And then he missed the entire 2020 season, came back in 2021, didn't look like the same athlete early on in the season. Then he hurts his ankle. So you don't know if it was coming back or not. The scary thing for me is he does his pro day and he runs a 4.63 40. Okay, that's not great, but we saw T. Higgins run a 4.6 40. It's fine. When you're that big, it's not ideal, but it's not a killer either. The problem I had was a 1.76 10-yard split, which that is historically the worst 10-yard split of any receiver to come into the NFL draft since 1999. To give you some perspective, Jordan Davis, a 340-pound defensive tackle, ran a 1.68 10-yard split. So we're talking about somebody who just has no initial acceleration or quickness. Is it because he's still rehabbing from the ankle injury, or is that athlete just gone? I don't know. And that's what's so hard about this evaluation.
And I think the thing too, like when I'm watching this guy play off the line, he's somebody that I think can win off the line in terms of his movement and ability, which I think is kind of surprising for a guy that's as tall as Justyn Ross. Like his ability to like wiggle off the line, I found that really intriguing, but he doesn't win off the line with like speed necessarily. And he can't get it down the field either. I think
I almost think he needs to be like a big slot in the NFL, right? Because I don't see him winning with quickness and speed on the outside. But if he's in the slot and he's not being pressed, could he be like a middle of the field target, like in the 10 to 15-yard range where you're throwing to him down the seam? I think I could see that, but
and that's a place where you don't have to win. Like coming out of the slot, you can win with some of that movement, and you can get off the line with your movement, not necessarily all of that speed, but just utilizing that coverage to your advantage. Yep. Now, I mean, the question for me, I think, comes again. Do you think that this is a situation where, I mean, have we seen? Excuse me. Have we seen the best of Justyn Ross already?
Yeah, I think we probably have. Does that mean that he can't be a useful or productive NFL player? No, but Dane Brugler from The Athletic, he tweeted out a thing at the beginning of the 2020 college season that, hey, if Justyn Ross is healthy, he's a top 5 player in this class and my number 1 overall receiver. And then he plays, and you just don't see that same player that we saw 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So, yeah, I think this idea that he's ever going to be like a dominant number 1 receiver, you could kind of throw that out the window. That's just not going to happen here.
I mean, it's super
unfortunate. Depressing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because this is somebody who, man, we rewind even the 2019 season, man, we're talking about him in the same class of prospect as Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, and I mean AJ Green. Like, he had that much rare ability, but it's just gone. And now you've got to try to figure out, okay, if he's not going to be that, what can we turn him into in the NFL? Can he be a Marquez Colston? Maybe that's at the high end, right? This big slot receiver. Can he be something like that? We shall see. Kate, I want to talk about his dynasty value, where we'd like to see him go, where we think he'll be drafted. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports development, including league reviews and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting, the playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Kate, where do we think Justyn Ross is going to be drafted? Because I think the idea of him being a 1st or 2nd round pick is probably gone at this point. But where do you see his range?
I think he's going to go probably in the 3rd round, and not necessarily based on what we've seen from him recently. But I do think that ghost of what we saw back in 2018 and even 2019. I think that is going to leave him a little bit higher on draft boards because the ceiling was set to be pretty high before all of these things came into play. The injuries, the foot, there was just all of this extra noise here.
Sure.
But I think we know that when it comes to just Justyn Ross, whether that be him, like removing some of these extraneous factors like the health, the quarterback play, I think we know when we're just looking at Justyn Ross, the player, his ceiling is generally pretty high. So do I think he deserves to be drafted in the 3rd round based on his most recent production and injury history? No, but I could absolutely see a team falling for Justyn Ross of 2018, 2019 and taking him a little bit higher in hopes that those traits that made him a top wide receiver in those 2 seasons, 1,865 yards, 17 touchdowns in his first 2 years. Like you said, I don't think that's necessarily a fluke, but
No.
it just depends on how much these teams believe that player is still there.
Yeah, I can see him going late 3rd round because there's quite a few teams that have compensatory picks starting at like 98 that all could take him and maybe redshirt him and say, hey, just get healthy, kind of learn our system, and let's see what you look like a year from now once you're fully recovered from the ankle, you're 2 years removed from the back injury. I'll give you the teams' names because these teams are all willing to take risks. It's the Saints at 98, the Browns at 99, the Ravens at 100, the Eagles at 101, the Dolphins at 102, the Chiefs at 103, the Rams at 104, and then the 49ers at 105. I can see any of those teams being like, this is a top 5 talent. If we can just wait and maybe we put them on PUP or NFI and we wait a year, we might be getting a quality receiver here in the hundreds.
Which of these teams do you trust to best develop a guy like Justyn Ross?
Probably the Rams. Probably. Because I think the Rams have enough receivers right now where they feel like, we don't need him to play right away.
Tutu Atwell, wide receiver 1.
Well, that's it.
Just added Allen Robinson in the mix.
Yeah, but that's exactly the reason why they don't need him right now is they have Cooper Kupp, they have Allen Robinson, they have Tutu Atwell, they have Van Jefferson. They could say, hey, just try to be ready for the playoffs, and we'll see what we can do there. And if you're not, that's fine. We'll have you ready in 2023 when we have some other contracts going up. I think that's the team that I would like to see him with. But, Kate, I would not be surprised, though, if he falls further than what we think. I kind of agree with you. I think somebody late 3rd round, 4th round is going to pick him, but would it shock you if he falls to 6th, 7th and undrafted because of all the injuries, because of the poor testing? No, we've seen this happen before.
I don't think he goes undrafted. I don't think we've fallen this far.
Yeah, I think that's probably a stretch. I think, but 5th, 6th round, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
No, and you know what? I mean that puts his dynasty value very much, like in flux because, any team really in this range, any team is in play. I always say like the later these guys fall, not necessarily great for, our dynasty value in terms of, they're going to get a starting shot like right out of the gate. But I mean, the nice thing about, when these guys fall down the board a little bit is that they are in play for some of these better teams and better opportunities that if injury befalls a guy before them in the draft and or on their roster, there's going to be opportunity presumably in the future. And these are some pretty good teams in play for, a guy in contention like this. Now, if you could just pick any offense, because I said pretty much any team is on the board here, who could use a wide receiver with Justyn Ross's skill set? So I think we're projecting him to play in the slot, which he had played on the outside in his first 2 seasons with Clemson, but did transition to the slot. Are you concerned at all that after that transition into the slot, we didn't see a an uptick in performance, or do you
A
think
little
that's
bit.
a product of the offense?
A little bit of both. DJ Ungale was just not a very good quarterback last year, so it's hard to take too much away from him. But in terms of where I want to see him land, I actually have two spots. I think Buffalo makes a lot of sense, right? Because they could use a vertical slot receiver, and even though he's not particularly fast or quick, could he get down the seam and make some catches with his huge frame and catch radius? Sure. But one that I would actually like to see is with the Raiders. He's very close with Hunter Renfrow, former teammate at Clemson. You keep him as the wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 right now, and then maybe a year from now he replaces Brian Robinson on the outside, or maybe he slides into the slot if the Raiders decide to let Hunter Renfrow go in free agency. But I think Derek Carr would be a really good quarterback for him.
I mean, we know that Derek Carr can deliver a football, so that's helpful. Yeah, certainly an upgrade on his quarterback from last season. So I think we'll take that. What about Philadelphia, a team that just very sorely needs a slot wide receiver? I think this, Philadelphia, is definitely a team that has more immediate needs of a slot receiver. Like I don't know that Justyn Ross would be ready to come out and play, but I mean, he might already be an upgrade on what they've got playing out of the slot at this point. But I mean, that is a place where I think he'd have an immediate chance to make an impact if he's healthy.
Yeah, he would get targets if he's healthy. I just feel like Philadelphia probably needs some receivers that can play right away. Yeah. And I'd like to see Ross go to a team that will allow him to sit, get healthy, and develop. I think if Ross was 90% healthy, Philadelphia would make a lot of sense, but I'm not sure it's the best landing spot. Kate, I want to ask you about his rookie ranking among receivers right now. Currently on Dynasty League Football, he's ranked as wide receiver 13 behind John Mechie and Wan'Dale Robinson, but the rankings are all over the place. Bruce Madsen, who we met at the FFX Expo, has him ranked as wide receiver 9. And then you look at Shane Hallman, has him ranked as wide receiver 20. Where do you feel comfortable ranking Justyn Ross? Is it closer to Christian Watson, Dodson, or are you down more in the Romeo Doubs, Khalil Shakir, Alex Pierce range?
I'll take the latter there. I'm just not. I have a lot of concerns about Justyn Ross, like kind of across the board in terms of health, in terms of the decrease in production. Like, I think this was probably the perfect storm of events for Justyn Ross to have a very disappointing career. Like, a lot of things had to go wrong for him to have that trajectory that he has had, and they all went wrong, like across the board. But the thing that I keep getting caught up on is that, I think his game, I thought, would translate better to the slot, but the fact that we didn't necessarily see him bounce back this season after getting the opportunity to play out of the slot, that makes me a little bit nervous. I mean, every single season with Justyn Ross that he played, we saw a decrease in yards, touchdowns, yards per reception, average depth of target, yards per route run. That's not good. We've said it before. We want to see some sort of development here, and we just didn't see it.
I will say this, Kate, though. If you're down drafting past the top 10 receivers, and I love Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he's a phenomenal player. But in a dynasty league, I'd rather take the 6'4", 205-pound receiver from Clemson, who I've seen have an elite season before, right? Like, Wan'Dale Robinson could be a really good player, and he could be worth his third-round draft capital. But at that point, I'm just swinging for upside, right? Because the odds that Wan'Dale Robinson is in my lineup every week are pretty small. Like, I think he's going to be a useful player. But if Ross hits, you might be talking about somebody who has wide receiver 2 potential. And if he doesn't, it's fine. It's a third-round pick. I'm not losing any sleep over it. So I think I'd be more inclined to take the upside.
Based on his traits, I think he's more of this upside wild card than, I'm always going to want to chase the guy that I actually has, some of the traits, some of the size, some of the history of productivity over some of these names that aren't necessarily on many people's draft boards in real life. Like I'll take the guy that we've seen the upside from, but I still think that I'm not unconcerned. I'll say that.
Okay. I agree. There's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic that's going to work out, but if you're getting in the third or fourth round of your rookie drafts, why not? Right? It's a worth taking at that spot. All right, let's take one more quick break so we can tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours to eat better, thanks to Built Bar. And it's because it's so easy. Built Bars only contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 4 net carbs, but they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Compare that to your average candy bar, and it's not even really a contest. So go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Kate, we've got a mock draft Monday here. This is from Locked On NFL Draft. We're just going to run through some of the notable picks, and I just want the first word that comes to mind when you make these picks. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but just the first word or first sentence that you think.
Okay.
First landing spot, Malik Willis to the Panthers.
Ew.
I agree. I think that's a bad fit for him. Drake London to the Falcons at number 8.
I like it.
I like it a lot, right? You get 2 skyscrapers there with Kyle Pitts and Drake London. So whatever quarterback is there next year, right? That's good weapons. I like it. Garrett Wilson to the Jets at number 10.
Solid for the Jets. Not a huge fan for fantasy.
Yeah, I think I like Wilson to the Jets better than I like London to the Jets for them. But I think London is a better fantasy player in New York than what Wilson is. All right, next one. Let's keep moving. Jamison Williams, wide receiver from Alabama to the Saints at number 16.
Love.
Yeah. Although I'd like to see him go to the Chargers. It's still a good fit, especially with Jameis throwing the ball. Love it. Chris Olave to the Eagles at 18.
Love.
See, I hate that fit for Olave.
You have to explain that. I know we're keeping this short, but
because I feel like he's a lesser version of a Devontae Smith. They've already got one of these premier route runners. I'd rather see somebody that has a little bit of a different skill set there. I just think Olave.
Would you prefer to see like a Drake London over a Chris Olave? Maybe somebody that gives them a little bit more like size and
I'd rather see
power?
Jamison Williams in Philadelphia than Olave.
Okay.
Frankly, I'd just like to see Olave go to a different team than the Eagles. I don't know if that's a great fit. Like if he goes
he matches up with the skill set of Devonta Smith.
Yeah.
I'd
rather see Olave go to like Dallas or Green Bay or something like that. They can get him a bunch of targets because I just don't know if he's going to be the second receiver in Philadelphia and really probably the third passing target behind Smith and Goddard. I don't love it.
I think like in this particular example, Olave and Smith are kind of 1A, 1B. I don't really see it as one versus the other, but I understand your point that they are a similarly built.
Well, and I kind of think
they're cut of the same cloth.
I'd like to see Olave go to a team that's a little bit more of a quick passing offense that throws the ball a bunch because he's just so good before the catch, right? Getting open. So give him more with a timing-based quarterback where I'd rather see somebody that can make plays down the field with, and I know Olave can, but more consistently down the field like Jamison Williams. But let's get into some more of these. Desmond Ridder to the Saints at 19.
It's all right.
Okay. Kenny Pickett to the Steelers at 20.
That's a firm no for me.
Yeah, that's a terrible
no for me, dog.
For both parties. All right, let's keep going. Christian Watson to the Packers at 28.
Way too early.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know people are anticipating that, but that is It feels like you're
Way
getting Marquez
too
Valdez-Scantling
early.
again, right? And you're paying first-round draft capital to do it.
But you know what? That like wouldn't with the way that the Packers have utilized their draft capital in the past couple of years wouldn't surprise me at all. So maybe just lock it in, but let it be known. I think it like terrible fit. It's way too early.
Yeah.
And there are still other better wide receivers on the board at this point.
Jahan Dodson to the Lions at pick 32.
Interesting.
Yeah, it feels like where he should be picked, right? Very late first round, top of the second round, gives you I don't think he's ever going to be a number 1 receiver in the NFL, but a solid number 2. Why not?
So are you saying it feels right to see Jahan Dotson go before Treylon Burks?
No, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Treylon Burks does not go in the first round of this mock.
That's my biggest conundrum right now.
I would be shocked if that happened. I still think Burks is going to go relatively early. You just don't find guys that are that big with that kind of production from the SEC fall out of the first round very often. So we shall see. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're less than 10 days away from the NFL draft. It's going to be a busy time around here. So make sure you're downloading the podcast. Make sure you're checking us out on YouTube. Matt and Ryan will be back on Tuesday and Wednesday. Kate, you and I will be back on Friday. I'm assuming we'll get some big NFL news because we always do between our shows. If not, we'll continue with our rookie profiles because we still have a lot of players to talk about. So follow Kate at FF Ball Blast. You can follow me at Marcus_Mosher. And we'll see you guys right back here on Tuesday with Matt and Ryan. Bye, everybody.
Bye.